Imagine pulling your minivan up to a KFC drive-thru on a Tuesday evening. You've got grandkids in the back, everybody is hungry, and you just want a simple, effortless dinner.
Right, just a quick bite on the way home.
Exactly. So you lean out the window, looking at the glowing menu board, and you order 3 sides of coleslaw and a single kid's chicken nugget meal. Nothing extravagant at all.
Yeah, that should be what, maybe 10 or 12 bucks?
You would think so, but you pull forward to the payment window, and the voice through the speaker reads back your total. $36.
Wow. It creates a genuine moment of cognitive dissonance. You instinctively assume the register made a calculation error, you know?
Yeah, like they rang up the car behind you by mistake.
Right. Because $36 for a handful of nuggets and some cabbage,
Yeah.
I mean, it fundamentally breaks our internal understanding of what this food is supposed to cost.
It really does. Or picture rolling up to a Carl's Jr. to grab a standard lunch for just 2 people, and the cashier asks you to hand over $43.19.
It's just staggering.
It is. We are looking at a consumer landscape that has become entirely unrecognizable from the one most of us grew up in. And that is the mission of our deep dive today.
Yeah, we're really digging into the sudden, shocking, and, well, potentially permanent end of cheap fast food in America.
Exactly. We are going to examine what this means for everyday Americans, whether you're, trying to balance a household budget on a fixed retirement income, or you're a parent trying to feed a family between after-school activities.
Because the broader implications here extend way beyond just the price of a hamburger. Fast food has historically functioned as a crucial economic pressure valve for the working and middle classes in this country.
The pressure valve, right.
Yeah, when household budgets tightened or when dual-income parents simply lacked the hours in the day to cook, the drive-thru stood as this reliable, affordable safeguard.
And removing that safety net sends profound psychological and financial ripples through the entire economy. It changes the whole paradigm.
It really does.
Looking at a modern drive-thru menu board, it feels remarkably similar to stepping into a high-end luxury boutique. You find yourself doing mental math and checking your bank account balance before you dare to add a side of fries.
Which is wild for an industry built from the ground up on mass accessibility. How it became a line item we have to carefully budget for really requires a deep look at consumer sentiment.
And the public is clearly reacting to this. We have recent survey data from LendingTree that puts some very stark numbers to this exact feeling of sticker shock.
Right, the LendingTree data is fascinating.
It is. A staggering 78% of Americans now officially view fast food as a luxury purchase.
Almost 80%. And the underlying details of that survey reveal a heavily stratified economic reality.
How so?
Well, when researchers drilled down into the motivations behind those responses, half of the people polled explicitly stated they view these meals as a luxury because they are personally struggling to meet basic financial obligations.
Wow, so it's directly tied to their overall financial stress.
Exactly. And this burden isn't distributed evenly. It falls with disproportionate weight on the most financially vulnerable segments of society. 71% of Americans making under $30,000 a year view fast food as a luxury.
Which makes sense. And I imagine that hits retirees hard, too.
Oh, absolutely. We see similar numbers among older folks on fixed incomes, parents of young children, and younger generations just entering the workforce.
To broaden the perspective, we can also look at data from the Harris poll, which entirely confirms this shift. Today, only 32% of adults agree that quick-service restaurants actually offer affordable meal options.
So fewer than a third of adults even associate the phrase fast food with affordability anymore. That's a massive brand failure.
It really is. The Harris poll also noted that 81% of adults have noticed prices are significantly higher. But it's not merely the numbers on the board changing, right?
No. Consumers are noticing alterations to the actual physical products they receive. The polling data shows 35% of consumers have detected shrinkflation in their drive-thru orders.
Shrinkflation. That's where you pay the same or more, but get less food.
Precisely. The retail price remains static or increases, while the physical volume of the product is subtly reduced. In the fast food sector, this manifests in a few sneaky ways.
Like making the burger smaller.
Yeah, meat purveyors might alter the diameter of a beef patty, or packaging engineers will redesign a French fry carton so that it appears visually full while holding 15% fewer fries.
That is so frustrating. The consumer is paying a premium, but the caloric yield is actively shrinking.
Right. And this combination of higher prices and smaller portions is fundamentally altering human behavior. People aren't just complaining. 62% of respondents report they're eating fast food less frequently.
They are actively voting with their wallets. We reviewed a transcript from a viral video documenting a family's recent trip to Chick-fil-A. It was just a standard American family out for a meal.
2 adults, 2 kids, right?
Yep. They ordered 2 basic combo meals, a shared large mac and cheese, and a large fruit cup for the kids. The final total was $60.
Which breaks down to $15 per person for a quick paper bag meal. That perfectly illustrates a critical macroeconomic concept described by Dr. Sylvain Charlebois.
He's a visiting scholar in food policy, right? What was his concept?
He characterizes our current landscape as a K-shaped economy. To understand the mechanics of this, visualize the letter K.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You have a vertical stem with one arm branching upward and another branching downward. In a K-shaped economic reality, the upper-class demographic, the top arm of the K, continues to spend with relative impunity.
Because they can afford to.
Exactly. They can absorb a 20% price increase on a chicken sandwich without fundamentally altering their lifestyle or their household budget. But the middle and lower classes...
The downward arm of the K.
Right. They're forced to implement drastic changes and rein in their expenses just to maintain a baseline standard of living. Dr. Charlebois suggests that fast food operators have aggressively targeted the top arm of that K.
They're catering to the wealthy to protect their profit margins.
Exactly. And in doing so, they have crossed a critical psychological threshold. The industry is no longer the default, accessible option for the bottom arm of the economy.
But, if 78% of the population views this as a luxury and over 60% are reducing their visits, it raises a fundamental business question for me.
Why haven't they panicked and slashed prices?
Exactly. Why hasn't the industry recognized this massive loss of foot traffic and reverse course? It feels like they're operating on, like, a software subscription model.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, they hooked the American public with a cheap introductory rate in the 90s and 2000s, and now that society is completely dependent on the convenience, they're massively hiking the renewal fee.
And to understand how extreme this hike is, we really need to look at the historical data. Comparing exact prices from a few decades ago to today provides the starkest illustration of this shift.
Let's do it. Let's look back at 1996.
Well, in 1996, the industry operated on a completely different pricing paradigm. A standard Subway foot-long sandwich, for example, retailed for $3.99.
And today, in 2026, that same sandwich cost $9.99. That is a 2.5 times increase in raw price.
The numbers for Burger King are equally jarring. In 1996, a standard Whopper meal was $3.56. Today, that exact same meal combination sits at $10.29.
Nearly a threefold increase. And McDonald's might be the most extreme example. In the late 90s, their premium burger was the Arch Deluxe, priced at $2.49.
And their modern equivalent, the newly launched Big Arch, commands $8.89. That is a 3.6 times increase.
It's unbelievable. And we don't even have to look back 30 years to see this trend. Just 10 years ago, a standard Chick-fil-A combo meal was priced at $6.66.
And today, that exact same meal is $17. The magnitude of these increases becomes even more apparent when we place them in a macroeconomic context.
Right, because prices generally go up over time, but fast food pricing has entirely decoupled from the standard rate of inflation.
It really has. Based on data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, the specific cost of fast food meals has risen by 41% just since 2017.
41% in less than a decade. And if we looked at the General Consumer Price Index, the CPI, which measures the average change over time in prices paid by consumers, that broader index has only risen by 35.9% in the same time frame.
So the fast food sector is inflating significantly faster than the rest of the economy. McDonald's own internal corporate data confirms this, showing their average menu item increased by roughly 40% between 2019 and 2024 alone.
Knowing that drive-thru prices are outpacing general inflation is one thing, but looking at the most current data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics reveals an even deeper divide.
Oh, the May 2026 CPI report paints a fascinating picture when you compare restaurant costs to grocery costs.
Let's break that down. The index category labeled food away from home, which includes all restaurant dining, rose 3.5% over the preceding 12 months.
Right, and within that category, limited service meals, which is the technical term for fast food, rose 3.3%, Full-service sit-down meals rose 3.8%.
However, when we look at the category for food at home, which tracks standard grocery store purchases, that index only rose 2.7% over the same 12 months.
And it gets even more interesting when you dig into specific grocery data. Certain staple categories aren't just inflating slower, they are actually experiencing deflation. The cost is actively going down.
Wait, really? What's going down?
The BLS data shows the index for dairy actually fell by 1% over that year. Specific items like cheese dropped by nearly 3%.
So the underlying agricultural commodities required to make a cheeseburger are actually getting cheaper, while the retail cost of a finished fast food cheeseburger continues its aggressive climb. How does that make sense?
It comes down to the fundamentally different operational mechanics of the two industries. Grocery stores operate on massive scale and automation, so they pass commodity price drops relatively quickly to the consumer.
But restaurants don't.
No. Restaurants have layers of fixed costs: commercial real estate leases, franchising fees, marketing budgets, and the labor to assemble the food. When those fixed costs rise, they rarely pass commodity savings down to the consumer. They absorb them to protect their profit margins.
Which radically alters the purchasing power of the average family. We reviewed an economic analysis noting that a single U.S. dollar from 1996 holds the rough purchasing power of $29 in our 2026 context.
Because the specific fast food items we discussed have more than doubled or tripled in their relative costs, far outpacing standard inflation.
It's like the frog in boiling water. We didn't notice the 10-cent increments over the years, but looking back a decade, the temperature is suddenly scalding.
That's exactly how it feels. The CPI data essentially confirms that the grocery store is functioning as the final economic refuge for retirees and middle-class families.
You're now paying an unprecedented premium purely for the convenience of not assembling the meal yourself.
It forces a highly rational economic choice. When raw groceries stabilize or deflate, but the drive-thru continues to skyrocket, the financial penalty for convenience simply becomes too high for everyday Americans to justify.
Now, this massive historical spike begs a crucial question about the root causes. If we want to understand how the industry reached this point, we have to look back at what exactly caused the demise of the legendary dollar menu.
For anyone managing a household budget in the 2000s, that menu was an institution.
It really was. It defined the baseline expectation for cheap food. So what killed it?
To understand the death of the dollar menu, we have to examine the inherent structural tension of the franchise business model. McDonald's introduced the modern iteration of it in 2002.
And from a marketing perspective, it was brilliant.
A masterstroke. It solidified the psychological expectation that hot, prepared food could be purchased with a spare change in your cup holder. But internally, it created an immediate crisis.
Between the corporate entity and the independent franchise owners, right?
Exactly. Because they make their money in fundamentally different ways. In a franchise model, the corporate headquarters generally collects its revenue as a percentage of the top-line gross sales.
So they just want maximum foot traffic, regardless of the profit margin on individual burgers.
Yes. The franchise owner, however, only makes money on the bottom line, after paying for the food, the labor, the utilities, the rent, and the corporate royalty fees.
And the dollar menu completely disrupted that bottom line.
Completely. When it launched, it drove massive foot traffic, but it cannibalized the sales of higher margin items. Customers were coming in, but data show they were spending roughly 3 cents less per visit than before the promotion began.
So they just ignored the premium combo meals and assembled a cheap meal out of 3 or 4 $1 items.
Right. The franchise owners saw their profit margins completely evaporate. They were doing vastly more work, moving higher volumes of product, but taking home less money.
So how did the major corporations attempt to pivot away from this unsustainable model without alienating the customer?
They attempted a very slow, highly calculated transition. Instead of abruptly canceling the menu, they introduced concepts like the dollar menu and more, or the $1, $2, $3 menu.
Oh, I remember those.
The goal was to subtly shift the consumer's psychological anchor away from the single dollar. But the consumer backlash was immediate. People felt it was a bait and switch.
And the corporations defend this pivot by pointing to very real systemic pressures in their supply chains, right? They argue the world just changed.
The operational challenges they cite are legitimate. Over the last 2 decades, there has been a massive push toward higher food quality standards, sustainable sourcing, stricter agricultural practices, and animal welfare commitments.
Like cage-free eggs or gestation crate-free pork.
Exactly. Those initiatives are structurally more expensive. When you combine that with rising energy costs to run commercial fryers and the massive logistical expenses of transporting goods, producing a hot sandwich for a single dollar is just mathematically impossible now.
While those supply chain arguments definitely hold weight, consumers are increasingly questioning whether that narrative provides convenient cover for deeper corporate motives.
You're talking about executive compensation.
Yeah, we found numerous sources highlighting immense frustration with the sheer scale of executive pay in this sector. One consumer analysis pointed out that the CEO of a major fast food conglomerate took home $19.2 million in a single year.
Which is roughly 1,200 times the salary of the typical worker assembling the food.
Right, so when the public sees those figures, they naturally ask, are these massive price hikes actually funding sustainable agriculture? Or are they primarily functioning to guarantee massive executive bonuses?
It highlights the core friction of publicly traded corporations. The executive suite faces relentless pressure from massive investment funds to demonstrate quarter-over-quarter growth.
And if foot traffic plateaus, they have to find another way to grow.
Exactly. The primary mechanism left is to aggressively increase the amount of money extracted from the smaller pool of customers who are still utilizing the drive-thru.
And the methods they're using to extract that money have evolved far beyond simply printing new numbers on a plastic sign. The gamification of pricing through digital apps is fundamentally changing the transaction.
It really is. The industry's mass transition to digital ordering platforms represents a profound shift in how food is priced.
It feels incredibly opaque. We reviewed consumer anecdotes where people pull up to a drive-thru just trying to find out the cost of large fries and discover the physical menu board no longer lists the prices.
Right, you're instructed to download the app just to see the menu.
Why should you have to forfeit your personal data and location tracking just to find out what a potato costs? And when they finally access the app, the prices are staggering. One consumer documented being charged $4.39 for a large fry at McDonald's.
And the physical product they received was soggy, and the carton was only half full, a staple item that used to anchor the dollar menu.
Exactly. So what is the corporate strategy behind forcing everyone onto these apps?
Well, the push toward app-based ordering serves three highly lucrative functions. First, it functions as a massive data harvesting operation. They track your location, your ordering habits, your price sensitivity.
That data is gold to them.
Exactly. Second, it enables dynamic pricing models, commonly known as surge pricing. Because the menu is digital, algorithms can adjust the price of a hamburger in real time based on local demand or rush hour traffic.
Bypassing the logistical hurdle of changing physical signage.
Precisely. And third, the app environment intentionally obscures the baseline cost of the food. By forcing you to navigate digital rewards points and app-exclusive bundles, the actual price becomes entirely opaque.
You lose the ability to accurately judge whether you're paying a fair market rate. It creates an exhausting landscape for someone just trying to feed their family.
It really does.
But if we want to truly understand where the money from these $4 fries is going, we must examine the specific factor the industry consistently blames. Whenever a corporate press release attempts to justify a $10 burger, they almost universally point to the rising cost of labor.
Labor costs are undeniably the primary narrative deployed by the restaurant industry. It's a highly effective talking point because it sounds intuitively correct to the average person.
Yep.
If wages go up, prices must go up.
Right, it makes logical sense on the surface, but we actually have a recent comprehensive real-world case study to examine this claim, don't we?
We do. On April 1st, 2024, California implemented Assembly Bill 1228. This legislation raised the minimum wage specifically for fast food workers to $20 an hour.
And it established a fast food council, right?
Yes, introducing a model where workers, corporate representatives, and franchise owners negotiate future labor standards.
I remember the reaction from the industry prior to that law taking effect. It was nothing short of apocalyptic.
Trade associations issued dire warnings, predicting mass layoffs, severe reductions in hours, and catastrophic price spikes that would destroy consumer demand.
But we now have robust data on what actually occurred. The SHIFT project, based out of Harvard University, conducted a massive survey of thousands of workers to isolate and measure the real-world impact. What did they find?
The methodology is vital here because they compared California workers against similar workers in neighboring states where the law didn't apply. And their findings serve as a fascinating mythbuster.
Okay, tell me.
First, base wages for fast food workers in California instantly increased by an average of at least $2.50 an hour. The share of the workforce earning under $20 an hour dropped by a staggering 60 percentage points almost overnight.
So the wage floor was successfully raised, but the critical question is, did the doomsday predictions actually materialize? Did they cut hours or jobs?
The data overwhelmingly indicates they did not. Researchers found no empirical evidence of the negative operational consequences predicted by the trade
Oh,
groups.
really? None.
None. Employers did not fundamentally alter their staffing models to operate with fewer workers. They didn't systematically reduce weekly scheduled hours to offset the higher rate. And they didn't cut fringe benefits like health insurance or paid sick leave.
That's incredible. Employment levels remained remarkably resilient.
They completely absorbed the wage shock without collapsing.
It highlights a glaring inconsistency in the corporate narrative. It's akin to blaming a sinking ship on a single leaky faucet.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, if rigorous data from Harvard demonstrates that a sudden, massive increase in baseline labor costs didn't force mass layoffs or cut hours, it strongly implies that the financial capacity to absorb these costs already existed.
It absolutely challenges the pervasive assumption that hourly labor is the sole driver of retail inflation in this sector.
Right. It suggests the high menu prices are driven more by margin protection than by the strict necessity of covering payroll.
Exactly. Companies have multiple levers to pull when input costs rise. They can accept slightly lower profit margins, reduce administrative bloat, or rely on reduced employee turnover, which saves massive amounts of money in training.
However, to maintain neutrality, we should note that the Harvard study didn't paint a utopian picture for the workers.
No, it didn't. Severe precarity remains baked into the business model. 1/3 of the California fast food workforce remains involuntarily part-time. They want more hours to survive but aren't assigned them.
And nearly 2/3 still endure highly volatile, unpredictable scheduling, right?
Yes, often receiving less than 2 weeks' notice for shifts. So while the financial floor was raised, the fundamental stability of the jobs remains highly precarious.
So if the data suggests that labor costs aren't the singular force driving drive-through receipts into the $40 range, we have to look higher up the chain. We have to examine the psychology of the corporate executives.
Examining executive strategy reveals a profound structural disconnect between the boardroom and the reality of the American consumer. We're witnessing the industry attempt to pivot toward what we might call designer food in a broken economy.
The most glaring example of this came directly from the executive suite of Chipotle.
Oh, the earnings call.
Yes. Following a quarter where they saw a decline in sales volume, the CEO was remarkably blunt. He explicitly noted that internal market research showed 60% of their returning customer base now consists of households making over $100,000 a year.
Which is a huge shift in demographics.
Exactly. And instead of outlining a strategy to win back the middle-class diners who had abandoned the brand due to price hikes, he announced a plan to lean into this wealthy demographic.
The messaging was clear. They are perfectly comfortable abandoning the working-class consumer in favor of a clientele that could absorb continuous inflation without flinching.
It's a calculated but very risky pivot. Repositioning a mass market brand as a premium offering generates tremendous friction, especially when the physical product hasn't changed.
And that friction exploded into public view with the massive head nod controversy at Chipotle.
Oh man, that was wild. This ties directly back to that 35% of consumers who noticed shrinkflation. Customers were filming their orders convinced scoop sizes had been drastically reduced to protect margins.
Right, and in response to the viral outrage, the CEO flatly denied that portion sizes had been altered. But then he suggested a bizarre workaround.
He told people to just give a secret head nod to the line worker assembling the food, and the worker would intuitively know to provide a larger scoop.
Customers felt completely gaslit. It essentially told the public to ignore their own lying eyes and attempt to silently negotiate with a minimum wage employee for the food they already paid a premium for.
It perfectly illustrates the vast gulf in perspective between the C-suite and the lived experience of a consumer standing at the counter. And we saw a remarkably similar disconnect during a viral video featuring the CEO of McDonald's.
The Big Arch tasting video.
Yes. McDonald's was filming promotional material for their new, highly expensive Big Arch burger. The CEO was seated in a pristine test kitchen to perform a tasting. Throughout the video, he clinically refers to the burger as a product.
Right, a product, not a meal.
And when the moment arrives to actually eat the food, he takes the most hesitant, microscopic nibble imaginable. He visibly hesitates, appearing genuinely reluctant to chew and swallow the item.
And he awkwardly describes it as featuring sort of cheeses.
The public reaction was merciless. Commentators noted it felt like a Freudian slip, an unintentional revelation that the executive is fully aware of the highly processed nature of the food, and he has absolutely no desire to consume it himself.
It demonstrates how fundamentally the industry has abandoned its original social contract. Historically, the American public understood the trade-off. It was cheap, it was convenient, and it was generally understood to be nutritionally poor.
You sacrifice nutrition in exchange for massive convenience and rock-bottom prices.
Exactly. The current paradigm has shattered that agreement. The food is no longer cheap, it's only convenient. They're desperately trying to justify inflated price tags by positioning themselves as premium, but the quality hasn't been elevated to justify the cost.
Which forces a critical question. If a brand's stated strategy is essentially, if your household does not earn six figures, our menu is not for you, what are the systemic consequences?
Can an industry built on mass volume, the whole billions and billions served concept, sustain its massive footprint by catering exclusively to the wealthy?
Early market indicators suggest that is an incredibly dangerous gamble. When a fast food brand artificially inflates its prices, it accidentally places itself in direct competition with entirely different tiers of the restaurant industry.
And that leads us to the massive shift currently happening in American dining habits. Because if everyday families and retirees are priced out of the drive-thru, they aren't simply ceasing to eat, they are migrating.
And surprisingly, they're choosing to sit down.
They are. The migration is driven by the collapse of the traditional price gap. Fast food menu prices have surged by an average of 38% since 2019, so the financial buffer that separated a drive-thru meal from a sit-down restaurant has effectively vanished.
The Lending Tree survey captures this perfectly. Almost half of all consumers, 46%, now report that a trip to a drive-thru costs them roughly the exact same amount as a local sit-down restaurant.
And even more shocking, 22% report that fast food is now actually more expensive than casual dining.
To put that in perspective, it's like finding out an economy plane ticket suddenly costs the exact same as first class. If I'm paying $60 either way, I'm going to sit down, get a real plate, bottomless fries, and let someone wait on me.
Exactly. Basic consumer logic dictates you choose the venue that provides the highest ratio of value, and the financial markets are tracking this behavioral migration in real time.
We are witnessing a massive boom in the casual dining sector. Mid-tier brands like Chili's, Applebee's, and Olive Garden are aggressively absorbing the massive pool of price-conscious customers that fast food has alienated.
The financial metrics for these chains are staggering. Chili's recently reported a 24% increase in same-store sales within the U.S. compared to their previous fiscal year.
A 24% increase in physical foot traffic for a legacy brand is virtually unheard of in modern restaurant economics.
It really is. Consequently, their parent company, Brinker International, has watched its stock valuation soar by over 300% in just the past 3 years.
300%. While massive fast food chains are struggling to maintain foot traffic, and it's not isolated to a single company. The Cheesecake Factory and Darden restaurants are seeing massive gains too.
So how are these highly labor-intensive sit-down restaurants managing to capture this market share and offer competitive pricing while automated fast food chains claim it's impossible?
Right. How does the math work?
It lies in the fundamental differences in corporate structure. Casual dining chains generally operate with a much higher percentage of company-owned physical locations as opposed to massive networks of independent franchisees.
This centralized top-down control gives the corporate entity the power to strictly mandate national menu prices.
Exactly. They can aggressively roll out promotional loss leaders without constantly negotiating profit margins with thousands of angry franchise owners.
Which allows them to execute highly coordinated value campaigns, like the Chili's 3 for Me menu.
Precisely. CEO Kevin Hochman recognized the vulnerability of the fast food sector. He simplified their operational menu and aggressively marketed the 3 for Me meal, locking the price point at $10.99.
And he's been very transparent about the psychology of this, right?
Yes. He acknowledges that Chili's isn't the absolute cheapest food option in the country. However, modern consumers are hunting for the highest ratio of value.
For the exact same $11 you'd spend on a premium fast food combo, Chili's offers a beverage, an appetizer, a main course, table service, and a relaxed atmosphere.
They are structurally outvaluing the fast food value menus.
But the casual dining landscape isn't a universal utopia. While brands like Chili's are thriving by capturing the fast food refugee, Other legacy sit-down chains are facing severe crises.
Right. We've seen massive legacy brands like Red Lobster and TGI Fridays face sudden store closures, with some entering formal bankruptcy.
But paradoxically, the failure of a chain like Red Lobster actually serves to strengthen the casual dining brands that are surviving.
Exactly. When a Red Lobster location shuts its doors, the local population doesn't simply stop eating out. Those displaced diners migrate their spending to the Chili's or the Olive Garden in the same plaza.
Consolidating the customer base for the survivors. So the massive fast food conglomerates are fully aware they are caught in a pincer movement. They're losing middle-class customers to casual dining and lower-income customers to the grocery store.
So how is the industry reacting? What's next?
The immediate reaction is a painful physical contraction of their real estate footprint. Wendy's recently announced the impending closure of 240 to 360 locations across the U.S.
They are intentionally shuttering roughly 5 to 6% of their entire domestic chain, citing an 11% drop in sales.
Closing hundreds of physical locations is a massive, blinking red warning light. To stop the bleeding, the only logical lever they have left is to aggressively bring prices back down to reality.
They are trying, but it requires a perilous balancing act to avoid triggering a revolt among their franchise owners. We're currently witnessing the opening salvos of the new value wars. McDonald's launched a heavily publicized $5 combo meal, and Wendy's countered with a $3 breakfast.
However, retail analysts are tracking a subtle strategic shift. The corporate entities are realizing that comprehensive $5 bundle meals are still far too punishing on the profit margins of the local franchisee.
The math simply does not work for the owner-operator.
Right. Consequently, the strategy is pivoting away from bundled meals and moving toward promoting individual standalone items priced in the $3 range, like the McValue menu.
But the fundamental problem is that the modern American consumer is incredibly savvy. They possess long memories and calculators on their smartphones. Are these heavily marketed deals genuinely providing economic relief, or are they just smoke and mirrors? Consumers are acutely aware that McDonald's is currently spending millions to frame a single McDouble at $2.50 as a massive deal. But they remember that just a few years ago, the standard price was 2 McDoubles for $3.
The corporation is effectively framing a massive historical price increase as a temporary discount.
And that strikes at the core of the crisis. The consumer sees entirely through the promotional mirage. The foundational trust between the brand and the customer has been broken.
Because that trust is gone, lower and middle-income families are completely altering their habits. They are actively spreading their food budgets across a wider variety of retailers to hunt for genuine value.
We are seeing massive spikes in foot traffic at value-oriented grocery chains, regional dollar stores, and warehouse clubs like Costco.
Which brings us full circle to the most telling statistic from all of our research today. When pollsters asked Americans to identify their primary go-to strategy for an easy, inexpensive meal in the current economy, 56% stated their definitive answer is simply staying home and cooking.
Well over half the country. The data strongly suggests we are witnessing a permanent behavioral shift. The era of the mindless, daily fast food habit, built on the assumption of absolute affordability, is permanently over.
So bringing all of this data and historical context back home for you, the listener, what are the practical, everyday lessons you can take away, especially if you're managing a household budget or stretching a fixed retirement income?
First and foremost, you have to recognize that the era of drive-thru convenience is dead. You can no longer operate under the assumption that the brightly lit plastic sign represents a safe, cheap meal.
The most actionable takeaway is that the single best defense against corporate margin expansion is actively and ruthlessly voting with your wallet.
The reality of the K-shaped economy demands that consumers adapt. You must become an active hunter for value in your local market. Look closely at the casual dining chains actively offering $10 bundled meals with table service.
Those companies are aggressively fighting for your business, whereas the fast food chains are currently running complex algorithms to see exactly how much financial pain you will tolerate before you finally drive away.
Furthermore, navigating this economy requires rediscovering the immense financial leverage provided by the grocery store. As the CPI data clearly demonstrated, the cost of food at home is stabilizing and actively getting cheaper in several categories.
Taking control of your own ingredient sourcing is the ultimate inflation-proof hedge against the volatile economics of the fast food industry. We have covered a massive amount of complex ground today, from the launch of the dollar menu to the casual dining boom.
It's been a fascinating look at a huge cultural shift.
It really has. But as we wrap up this analysis, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over as you navigate your own neighborhood. If the fast food industry continues on its current trajectory, completely abandoning the working and middle class consumers who built its empire in a relentless pursuit of the six-figure demographic, what fills the massive cultural and economic void left behind? Are we heading toward a future where a simple paper-wrapped cheeseburger and a cardboard sleeve of salty fries is remembered not as the cheap foundational staple of the American experience, but as a rare, nostalgic luxury? Will the next generation look back at the concrete drive-through lanes of our suburban towns the same way we look at vintage luxury boutiques, as places meant only for the few who can afford the premium?
That is a profound question.
It's a profound shift in the American landscape and something to carefully consider the next time you find yourself staring up at a digital menu board. Keep asking the hard questions, keep actively voting with your wallets, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.